I'm actually going to go into some of the audience questions because we've gotten so many. I want to hit some of these areas before we leave. So Deal Daily and Nurle Kundu of Verizon asked questions around use cases for edge data. And specifically, Nurle Kundu asked, what are the business cases for edge compute? What's the low-hanging fruit that you see? And I'll open this up to all of the panelists.
Yeah, I can just share with, I invest a company called VEA, VEEA, and it's focusing on edge computing. And one of the use cases is construction site security and the safety, like whether people wear a hard hat, whether people smoke, and the things like a piece of log, a piece of equipment in misplaces, or they are standing in the edge of the building, and safety. I think all those trained AI models combining the edge computing with 5G in the large construction area is a great use case for 5G.
Absolutely. And just from our position at Equinix, we've definitely seen the safety, especially oil and gas in the energy industry. Those use cases have absolutely taken off because you can, if you can picture this, if they are monitoring, say, they are monitoring a oil platform and they can see that something is wobbling or not quite acting right, they can shut down that platform before it blows. And the estimates that we've gotten is, depending on the size of a well or a platform, it can be between $200,000 and $2 million an hour to pause operations. And so when you look at that kind of use case, the ROI is clear right up front. And then, of course, and then if you take it to another level, the critical safety use cases, when it gets to human life at a mining site or at these energy sites, the cost of life is so big that these companies are also investing up front. We had a number of questions around some of these edge use cases come through the chat window and in advance of the event. So it's great, Elizabeth, that you've brought them up. I'd like to open it up further because I know Willie and Jim and Kelly and June, all of you from where you sit are seeing a lot of the AI and ML evolve. So what we've seen for the enterprise audience is that we've gone from analytics where systems told you what happened in the past to predictive analytics over the last few years, where these systems can accurately tell you what is likely to happen. And now we're moving into prescriptive analytics, which is where the systems are actually recommending courses of action, especially when you don't have a lot of time to respond. So as we discuss these edge use cases, we want to keep in mind that a lot of what you see with 5G was already possible. So a lot of these use cases were born during 4G. What's different now is how effective they are, maybe how detailed the information you can get is, and how quickly we can respond. And so if you think about 5G capabilities and how they're going to change us, right? We can support much lower latency. We can support better and more efficient use of bandwidth. And then we can support more connections for the same block of bandwidth. And so as an enterprise, I really loved what Willie said earlier about how we're going to think about what is the application or what is the use case that you have, or what's the challenge that you're having. And that's going to tell you which access technology you use, whether that's 3G, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi. And it's going to also tell you how, and based on what Elizabeth said, where you want to put your money first, right? We're not going to do everything all at once. So with these questions around the use cases for edge data, what is the panel seeing for how enterprises should maybe think about the edge data that's being collected and what's even possible? What advice would you give around this?
I can throw a couple of examples out from a couple of different verticals. So smart cities, I think, has a lot of applicability, whether that be, parking information, whether that be just connecting the roadways or intersections, right? I think it's a mandate in a lot of areas to have a camera at an intersection to be able to monitor if there's a lot of accidents in that intersection. Why is that happening? And should we do some different planning from a city perspective? Maybe adjust the lighting systems, maybe change up the routes in which, this intersection ends up providing, a safe environment for its patrons or a dangerous environment for its patrons. So I think That area is really interesting because there's a lot of them. They're very spread out. It's hard to connect them. So I think it falls in line with a nice area. I think supply chain in general, just like logistics, whether you're a rail company or even if you're landing at an airport, it's all about turnaround. It's all about how quickly do I know what's on that train, what's on that airplane, and what facilities do I need to get prepared and ready and pulled up at that facility or at that train or at that plane to offload it quickly and load it back up with something else so it can fly out. And I think that offers a really interesting play between technologies, Sharon, to where if I'm on, let's say a rail example, that rail 10 miles out, I know that it's coming in, but I don't have Wi-Fi connectivity to it. So I can start to offload information around what's on that train before it hits the yard and we need to turn it around. But as soon as it gets within 1,000 feet, it switches right over to Wi-Fi. So we're not using as much OpEx for that specific enterprise. We're using my network that's offloaded on my pipe and my connection that's there. And so it's those types of use cases and how we use what's existing inside of the customer's network, but how can we add this new element to make things more efficient, to make things better, to decrease costs or increase ROI?
I love that example, and actually we one of my favorite ones is, how do you fundamentally change the economics of the delivery of technologies, right? A lot of technologies have existed for a very long period of time, but they're generally inaccessible because of the cost of deployment, right? Putting, for example, a very high-end GPU in the hands of every single person who might want one is not going to work, right? A very expensive GPU can be thousands of dollars, right? However, if I pool those in a single location and then make them available, in pieces, essentially everything that cloud does for generic computing, right? I can deliver that on a more cost-effective basis and fundamentally change the economics, right? So at this point, I think most people are familiar with whether it's Google Stadia or NVIDIA GeForce, right? These are gaming examples, right? Where normally you would go out, you would buy a $500 console, right? For Christmas for your kid. Now I can get the same thing for $10 a month, right? And if I can do that using 5G for fixed wireless access to homes, so I don't necessarily have to have a cable modem to deliver that, or fiber to the home to deliver that, then all of a sudden I increase the addressable market for something that's extraordinarily popular to way more people, right? So that would be like an interesting consumer example. Flip it around and think about business. And I think Willie's example is a good one, because we've seen this in Equinix and one of our customers in the train space. And the idea behind this one was, normally, how does a train operator or manufacturer of train components monetize? They sell very expensive trains. These things cost tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, what if I wanted to deliver train as a service, right? If I wanted to do a monthly expense, I would then, as the manufacturer, have to prove to the people who I'm selling the train to that I can deliver all of the various service level agreements across every aspect of how the train operates, so that they would understand the train will do what it's supposed to do and do it on time. But to do that, I would need an inordinate amount of data. I'd have to pull it off the train constantly, and I'd have to process it very, very quickly to even make it possible. But yet we now see these examples actually happening in the market. We have a customer actually in Germany who actually delivers trains to a rail authority on a monthly recurring basis, right? Completely disrupted the way the monetization model works for that service. So those are the types of things. Sometimes people get, I think, a little overly focused on the really far out esoteric use case of, how does the Volvo on Verizon not see the Audi on AT&T on a blind corner, right? And certainly that is an acceptable use case for 5G, and that will happen. But there are more fundamental, simple economic benefits that will come from 5G just by the simple fact that I can make the end device less expensive, because I can pool the expensive part back into a data center somewhere and then share that against millions of people.
Just to build on what Jim's saying, we have seen everything on this panel. So we've done dozens of these panels at this point. We have seen everything from bagel as a service to mattress as a service to tire as a service. So companies are, one of the fundamental shifts of 5G is this thought of as a service. And 5G really pushes that, because if you think about it, the Nokias and the Ericssons of the world once gave everybody an appliance. You bought or you licensed the technology outright. But now the CapEx build out for 5G is so expensive that companies are very much thinking about buying things in snackable bits. They want to buy just exactly what they're using. So this as a service transformation is one of the key things that we need to think about as we're planning out our company's 5G transitions. So that's super, it's super interesting how there are so many use cases around just how do I take what I have been selling as a whole piece and break it up into something that is consumable in the way that is being used. And that's just fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to do a bit of a pivot to, we've had several questions about 5G for remote locations. So there have been agriculture, I think there was a mining, and there was also just the difference between how 5G might function in a rural environment versus an urban environment. So do we have any panelists who want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I want to jump on the story that we do in Thailand. We do a lot of innovation competition. One of the team came up with how to protect elephants. They basically put an IoT sensor on the elephant and try to come up with idea using 5G to track the movement of elephants and then make sure that the young elephants will not run on the road and take care of them. And that's one of the use cases. And then other people wanted to use 5G to monitor the flood and also to predict how well the crop is going to yield. I think in that sense, I think satellite technology might be better than 5G because 5G is more intensive. But back to March, when we were trying to help the kids with in the underrepresented kids with their computers, and I also talked to Gates Foundation and talking about donate a large amount of computers to the kids. And we found out that the problem is not about the computer; it's really about the network, about the if we have 5G in the rural area, the kids, you just can't give them a very simple computer. They can go online, go to the class. But nowadays, the problem is not only just computer, it's the connectivity. I think that in the rural area, it's really necessary to implement that, even though a lot of enterprise think this is a less critical areas.
I can chime in a little bit on this one. So I think a hope people in tracking all the variations of how 5G or 4G can get implemented. One of the things that's happened most recently is something called CBRS, which stands for Citizens Band Radio Service. And essentially what it is either it's a piece of spectrum in the mid band. So it's 3.5 to 3.7-ish or so, which is ideal because mid band spectrum propagates for miles, right? Unlike millimeter wave, which is very short distances. And what the government did was it noticed that, hey, there are blocks of spectrum that the government has had control of that are not used all that often. And this particular block of spectrum is mostly used by the Navy for when ships come into port and the radar installations need to use it. So it's only used on the coasts, but it was blocked in the entire country, right? And so what they basically realized was, well, wait a minute, if the ships aren't in port on any given day, or you're in the middle of the country, why not make it available? So they came up with a licensing scheme, and they recently had an auction. And this auction came up with about, I don't know, almost 5 billion in revenue back to the government. And I noticed some of the people on the chat are people who've taken positions in spectrum, right? So not just the MNOs, but a lot of wireline companies, specifically cable companies, and a lot of utilities companies have taken positions in CBRS, in part because they have something interesting. Like if you're a utility company, utilities have rights of way, And those rights of way generally are populated with fiber routes, right? Either they've built them or they partner with an MNO to build fiber routes through those areas. So now all of a sudden you have the opportunity to basically use this spectrum, which was relatively low cost compared to what the MNOs pay for other things, to start offering services in areas that would be very difficult otherwise to justify for the MNO to build a business case to go into that area. Right. So I think what you're going to start seeing as the market evolves is potentially non-traditional players becoming service providers and delivering services either specifically for enterprises or even for consumers in areas that you normally would not have seen them do that. So, that's an interesting innovation, and there continues to be pressure on the government side to figure out ways of extending that kind of model into other areas of spectrum that are specifically controlled by the government, but potentially, like say, would have a higher use or could be shared by other users. Because that's the biggest problem that the wireless industry has is, they don't make new spectrum. What's available is all there is, right? And so if somebody else is using it, you can't use it. So anything we can do to sort of make it easier to access improves the entire industry.
And Sharon, I just wanted to share, it does go back to one of your original questions, I think earlier, about what some of the organizations are doing. And Willie, I have to say in particular, I truly enjoyed your commentary on Cisco and June on Johnson & Johnson. I think there's so much out there. And this goes a little bit back to some of the shared work. So Hitachi and Ericsson have come together and have started to do some shared work. Through 5G corridor, Silicon Valley, we've set up an R&D lab and are doing some fun things. In the spirit of the use cases, trying to draw a little bit of this in, multi-access edge computing AI. What we found is that with we did a little bit of a test pilot and robotic arm picking up a task, so to speak, in a manufacturing floor. How might, based on the malfunction that it incurs, making sure that obviously you've got the right technology aligned. And we found that through sensing data and that real-time computing environment, being able to reduce about 50 to 70% in that productivity. So again, focused on the result at the end of the punchline there, but folks were very excited about the capabilities that it could bring.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring up Hitachi Vantara has been at the front lines of some of these edge use cases at AWS reInvent a couple of years ago. They were already on stage with AWS to do the I-70 corridor in Denver. They did a huge traffic use case around low latency, ultra low latency connectivity for a high throughput traffic area to do exception monitoring. So if there were some event that was picked up by video that was not normal traffic flow, they could actually trigger services in the area based on what was being sensed on that network in real time. So I really appreciate, Kelly, your bringing these use cases to light, because obviously in your view across an entire portfolio of clients, you have a tendency to see the patterns that can be picked up and the things that are coming to light across industries. First.
Yeah, so I just add one more use cases. I think it's important. As you know, we sometimes manufacture product in Germany, then ship to Africa. Obviously, it's not competitive. And the set up a plant in Africa is not that easy, right? You hold the back-end IT staff monitoring, and it's not there, right? You don't have people, you don't have infrastructure. You put everything on the cloud, you have a 5G connection, you could have set up plant anywhere, right? And you could, the plant is 5 meters from your office or 6,000 miles from your office. It's the same, right? That is kind of power, and that's what we are exploring.
Absolutely. And so we've hit on all these great use cases, but normally we would have already gotten to security before now. And we've gotten a lot of questions from panelists or from attendees rather about security. So specifically Jason Frame from the South Nevada Health District and Gary Miller both asked first about the security risks associated with edge compute and the security risks with 5G. Is there anything that we as a group would like to touch on that we think that we think we can give as a takeaway or a caveat or a framework for how they should approach security as they implement 5G in their organizations?
The reality is security is going to become a lot more complicated with these types of environments. So I think number one, it just stresses the importance of having security, not just as a firewall at the endpoint, but at every single point in the network. And having, this whole concept of zero trust boundaries, right? You have to have authentication. You have to have clear delineation as information, applications, data packets, whatever you have is, encrypted or covered from the point of generation all the way back through the core, through your different elements of the network, across different slices. The good news is we're doing that today in similar types of environments. When we talk about VRFs, if you talk about VLANs, if you talk about all this segmentation that we're used to doing already in software-defined networks, we're going to use and reuse a lot of what has been built for 5G. Obviously, there's new components, there's new aspects of the service orchestration and management frameworks that are coming into play. But I think a lot of those things are being considered and quite frankly can be reused from a lot of the things that we have already done in similar types of network designs. So I don't want to make it sound simple because there is a lot of complexity when we start to talk about all of these different elements living on the same medium, segmented while maintaining these SLAs, while maintaining low latency for mission critical applications and also massive scale, right? When we talk about, if we're doing a connected clothing example, right? I mean, how many pieces of clothing are out there, right? So definitely very complex, but luckily we've done this across other types of similar environments that I think we can easily leverage.
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit. I think when we have the 5G, we have edge computing, we have IoT devices. As Willie said, the network security becomes very complex because your network can be as weak as one of your IoT device. So this is why I felt like the security, this is one of the hesitations some of the companies wanted to deploy IoT devices, and they don't allow a lot of employees to bring a lot of devices to their workplace, just for the network security concern. So I just want to add this.
That's really great. Absolutely. So what is the single most salient piece of advice you would give to people on the call based on your experiences and maybe the challenges and problems that you've had?
I think the universal experience, and I think 5G gave the enterprise opportunity to provide their employee and also their customers very uniform, the omni-channel experience, and how you can keep those experiences personalized at the same time secure. It is the biggest challenge. And in the retail, it's pretty simple. You shop on your mobile, you shop in store, you shop online. All the experiences should be the same or similar and very, very secure, right? And then you get the same kind of advertisement. It's not like I bought a hat, the hat still follows me around, but rather very quick. This customer already bought something, shouldn't repeat outdated advertisement anymore. This is just an example that personalized, omni-channel, secure experience is the hardest challenge in this new arena.
I agree that the unified customer experience on the retail side is absolutely, and customers have become pickier and expect that kind of experience. So if you're going to do it, it either has to be really, really good or not at all, because customers just don't accept hiccups anymore. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, this is Kelly. To that end, your question, I'm sitting here pondering because
tough question. Yeah,
we're all at different levels, and when you think about what it is that we're trying to achieve, whether internal perspective or we're serving clients. And again, my comment, and I think Jim made a comment to this earlier. Meeting our customers and our clients where they are. And everyone is at such a different spot and a different need. And I think we talked about a phased approach earlier and really kind of not boiling the ocean, but really quantifying what it is we're trying to do and identifying those really crisp use cases that are going to provide the most value at the right time. Again, knowing we're going to get there and we are going to create the Tesla Google-like experience. Overused, but how do we create this environment using, again, as we've all preached to the choir, the 5G enablement. So just baby steps.
I love that.
I would just say keep it simple, right? To start, like, I mean, this is such a new environment that we're jumping into. Have a use case that makes sense. Have a use case that actually benefits from what this technology brings to the table versus trying to create one for just sake of saying I have a 5G application. Leverage your partners, right? Leverage the services that are across folks like Equinix, folks like our service providers and our carriers to build those relationships. You don't have to do it all on your own, right? I think a lot of people are talking about, I'm going to build my own private 5G infrastructure and all this good stuff. And in some cases, that's overkill, right? Do it because you need to, or think through what it is that you're trying to accomplish before assuming 5G is the immediate answer.
I concur with Jim. I say make a simple, start this baby step first, and pick up a strategic project, and pick up the project that makes sense business-wise, and do your investment and to do a test learn before you start scale up and develop a grand plan.
And then Jim?
I agree, right? I think the examples I gave earlier around, pooling gains and those kinds of things, those are super simple, straightforward, very easy to prove ROI, right? I think that's one thing. And then I want to actually, I think, riff off of Willie a little bit, because this is just Equinix's experience, right? Which is, there is no such thing nowadays as a good end-to-end service delivered by one entity, right? Gone are the days where you went to one company and they put everybody together and it all just worked. That's not how things get delivered, right? The one truism that we've learned at Equinix is that, essentially a good outcome for most enterprises is having easy access to the broadest collection of people that you can possibly get in one place, right? And so, what I think people need to do is, be agile, right? Expect to make changes, right? Expect to, change vendors, try different things, because, this is still happening. Like I said, a lot of this, what's due in terms of the technological roadmap hasn't happened yet, right? And so, we've got several years for this to play out. So, don't put yourself in a box, start simple, and understand that, as many partners as you can tolerate at one time, understanding that it will evolve.
Just to echo what Jim say, try to pick up open solution, not try to pick up end-to-end closed loop kind of a solution. Then you lock it down, and you don't know in this kind of environment. And we are in the startup in this area.